Hi, today you're going to learn how to use APIs via Python. So this app will focus on using APIs, and the next app after that is going to focus on creating APIs. Now, I know this doesn't make sense for most of you because you don't know what APIs are, but in the next video I'll explain what an API is, so everything will be clear for you. And then after that video we'll go and code, and you'll understand even further what an API is in practice. So with that said, I'll talk to you in the next video. Thanks. Hey, in this video we're going to talk about APIs. So by the end of this video, you'll know what an API is. You'll have a good understanding of APIs. And many people have a hard time to get a grasp of APIs. But this video will be based on examples, so I guarantee you will understand what APIs are. So let's get rid of the boring aspect of the word first. What does API mean? Well, API stands for Application Programming Interface. So that's just for you to know. Now let's look at an example so that you can understand what really an API is. Here on the left, I've opened a news website. Here. And here on the right, I have opened an API. Now, as you might know already, a website can be built in Python and also other languages, but Python is one of the programming languages which can be used to code a website. So this is an app, a web app. Now this here on the right is also an app. So this was a web app and this is an API app, you can say, or simply you can say an API. So this API can also be built in Python. So you code the API and you make it available as it is here right now. So when or who uses a website and when and who uses an API? Well, a website can be used by humans. So people, users, visitors who browse the web, everyone. And a website is readable by humans. So we have these pictures and text in bold and other fonts, so everything looks nice and tidy. Whereas the API is meant to be read by computers. So here, this API is also showing news. So we can read down here some news about Tesla. Automakers around the world are scrambling to secure raw materials, etc. So this also contains news, but these news are rendered in data structures such as JSON. So usually these are in JSON format, which looks like a Python dictionary. So for example, we have the status here. Okay, this is the status of the web page. So the API is telling the computer that the page was loaded successfully, and we have this total results of articles, news. And then somewhere else in here we have some other parentheses where the news starts and so on. So it's a list of news. Now, what do I mean when I say this data are read by computers? Well, specifically I mean that some apps will read this data, even this web app. So for example, let's say we want to build a web app where we show news. So our web app is going to get the news from somewhere, right? And that somewhere can be an API. So our web app, as we are coding it in Python, the web app can get this URL. So this is a URL which points to this particular page with this news. And so our Python code can point to this URL, and then the Python code can load this data. So we get this data in a Python dictionary, and then we render those data on our web app. So basically this app here, the Yahoo website, is also getting the data from some APIs, most likely. So the code base of this is querying these data, loading them on a dictionary or list or whatever, and then displaying them here on the website. So that's why APIs are called APIs, so Application Programming Interface. So it's an app meant to be used by other apps. So in this case, this website might be using this app. And in other cases, as you'll see throughout these lectures, we're going to use this API in our email automation app. So we're going to get news and we're going to parse them in Python and then send those news in a good readable format by email. So the email app will be the app which will use this API in our case. So it could be a web app, it could be an email app, it could also be a desktop app with a graphical user interface, or a mobile app. So all these apps are able to query data from this kind of APIs, and you learn exactly that in this app, how to use an API. And then in the next step after that, we're going to go one step further and create an API via Python. So first we use the API in this app and then we create an API in the next app. So you'll have a deep understanding of APIs. Now this particular API here is a REST API, or RESTful API in other words. So that's a specific type of APIs and it is the most used API. Therefore, REST APIs will be our focus throughout these lectures as well. So with that, we're ready to see how we can get data from APIs and use them in our apps. So I'll see you in the next video. Every morning I receive these news about a particular topic, Tesla in this case. I receive this news by email automatically, and the app that sends me these emails is an app built in Python, which I built, and in this video I want to show you how you can also build this. So we'll build it together, and so you can also get these news to your email address. Let's do it. Go to PyCharm and create a new project. I already created an empty project here, so I'm ready to code it. So create a new main.py file and start to think about how we can build this program. Now this program is not going to have a graphical user interface, so we can skip the phase where we design the front-end interface. Otherwise, that would be the first step, designing the front-end interface. Since we don't have that interface, then we can think of building the program by thinking of this path. So how can we go from the input data to the output? Which are the input data and what is the output? First, define that in your mind, and then it should be clearer where you can start and where you can finish with your program. So the input data should come from somewhere. Usually we had them in CSV file or .txt files or Excel files in the case of the invoice app, which we built previously. So by having the data in those files, we started from loading those files into Python data frames in our script. In this case, we also want to start from getting the data from the API to Python. So in this case, what we want to use is not pandas, but it's another library called requests. This is a third-party library, so you need to install it. Now, what does the request library do? What can we use it for? Well, let me explain it to you by looking at this web page, finance.yahoo.com. Now, the way we open this web page on our browser is by visiting this web page. So we type in finance.yahoo.com and that loads the content of this web page. So in this case, we're using the browser to get the content of this web page. So this content is stored somewhere on a server, right? Where the web app, the Yahoo website, is hosted. And we get it from the browser. But you can also get it from Python. So in that case, you don't type the URL in your browser, but you type it in Python. So that would be https s://finance.yahoo.com. So let's store this in a string. So this has to be a string since this is text. So we store it as a string type. Then, once we have the URL as a string, we use the requests get function. So this is a function. If I click on this and go to implementations, we'll see that this is a function defined in this request library. And this function gets a URL as an argument. And once you do that, you want to get the content of the web page using request. So this variable, don't confuse that variable with this. That's the module, the library itself. So it's in plural form with S. And this is just a variable. It could be R also. R here, R there. And so then you do text.text. That's a property of this object. So this creates a requests object type, just like we have string types. This is a special type as well. And then print out the content. If you run the script, what you will get in the command line is the web page, the same web page that we got when we visited that URL on the browser. The only difference is that the browser knows how to render the web page. So the web page is built in HTML code, and the browser is a program which knows how to render HTML. So it displays the web page in a nice visual format. But the command line doesn't know how to do that. So it just shows the web page in an uglier format, so to say, which is not very readable by us. So it's not really useful to use the requests library to open web pages via Python, because all you get is a bunch of code which is not readable. However, the requests library is useful when you want to browse an API which has this nice format, which is readable by computers. So this is stored in dictionary, and you have items and so on. So let's now go in here, and instead of passing the URL of this web page, we pass the URL of the API. For that, you need to do something beforehand. We want to go to newsapi.org, this website, newsapi.org. And then you want to sign up for an account. You should see a button somewhere here. Once you sign up, you can log in and you should see this view. So I've already logged in here and you should see this button. So go there to get an API key. And here you should see your API key. So copy that key and then go to Python, create a variable such as API key, and paste that key and store it as a string. So it should be around double quotes or single quotes. Once you do that, you want to go back to home, and here you should see the API documentation. For example, we have this example here. That's an example of a URL if you want to get news about Tesla. So if I copy that URL and I paste it in the URL variable, and since I was logged in, the website here has injected my API key to this URL automatically. In your case, this should be your own API, and so that's my API. If you don't have that, you should put your API here. So you can find this URL attached in the lecture resources if you didn't get it, if you didn't find it here on the website. So please find it attached in the resources. But then you need to change the API key to your own API key before you put it in this script. Since this is too long, I'll break it here, and that will not damage the string. So it's still one string, but split in across different lines. So now we're ready to run the script. Run, and what you'll get is this. So that's the same content that we get when we browse this page from the browser. The difference now is that we can make use of these data since we are working with a programming language. So we can parse, we can extract this data, and that would not be useful in the case of the browser. Here you can just see this data, you can just read them, you cannot use them for other purposes. So in our case, we want to use this data to send them by email to a particular email address. So let's do that in the next video. Thanks a lot for following this. I'll talk to you later. Hi, in this video we will continue to build our app, which will send emails with news every morning to a particular email address. So we're getting the data from this particular API, the newsapi.org, and this URL is an example of an endpoint. An endpoint is the actual URL. So you can say the endpoint, you can say the URL, and this particular endpoint gets us data about Tesla, news about Tesla. But you can change this to another topic and you'll get data for that topic. So how do these data look like? Well, you saw that already. So it looks like a dictionary, but is it a dictionary really? Well, that's something we can check by printing out the type of the content. So the content is what we get by using that text property, by applying that text property to request that variable. So don't confuse that variable with requests. And if I run this, we will see that this is a string. So this is just text. And that means we cannot really extract particular information from that content. We need a data structure which is more flexible, which is more structured, such as a dictionary or a list. So even though that content looks like a dictionary, it is actually just a plain string. To get a dictionary from that, you should apply JSON here with parentheses. If you run that code now you'll see that this is a dictionary. The type of content now is a dictionary. So if you print the actual content variable, here on the terminal you'll see the same content as we saw before, but the difference now is that we can apply indexing syntax to extract a particular value from that big piece of data. For example, you see that this is a dictionary, it has this key status and its value okay, then we have the comma, so that's the first pair of key and value, this one, and then we have the second pair of key and value, total results, and its value 12407, and then we have this key and its value is this list. It continues, so it's a list which has this dictionary. So we need to extract this list. So let's do here content articles. So articles comes as a string. You see it's with quotes here. And if I print this out now, what you'll see is the value of the article's key. So it's this list. Now, to better understand how these data are structured, we could use the debugging tool of PyCharm, because the debugging interface will give us a better view of this data structure. You'll see what I mean exactly. So let's start the debugging. I'll put the debugger, the breakpoint at the last line here. So before I create this content, so if I right click now and I go to debug main, what will happen is that the script will be executed up to this line. So this line here where the breakpoint is will not be executed. And so here in the debugger tab, so in the debug tab here, and then the debugger tab in here, you'll see all the variables that are declared up to this point. So for example, we have the API key, the contents, requests, etc. So we're interested about the content variable. So we access the value of articles which corresponds to this list, right? If you dig deeper into this article's value, you'll see that this is a list. So this is a list which has dictionaries as values. You see dict, 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 and each dictionary has 8 items. So the list has 100 items, each dictionary has 8 items, and then if you dig deeper, you'll dig deeper into the data structure. You see that each dictionary has the source key with its values and so on. So now we can go to the console tab, and here we have all those variables. We can access all these variables. So for example, content. So that's a content and content articles. We get this from content articles, and the length of content articles is 100. Sorry, I did a typo here, not articles. Yeah, so it's 100 items for this list. And therefore, since this is a list with many items, we can do a for loop such as for item or for article in content articles, a colon here, print article. So each list is a dictionary. And what do we need from that dictionary? Well, you can get the source, you can get the author, you can get the title of each post. So author, title, description. So let's get the description, article description. Execute that, and you're going to get the description of all the 100 articles. So similarly, you can get the title. Let me go back here and write title, execute, and those are the titles of all the 100 articles. So the debugger helps us to dig into the data, to understand the data, and then you can stop the debugger using that button, remove the breakpoint, and do the same code, write the same code that you wrote in the debugger, which was for article in content articles, print article title. So if you run this code, you should get the same titles that we got previously. So that's a very good use of the debugger. When you have complex data structures, you can stop the script at a certain point, and then you can go to the debug tab and explore the data in the debug console, which was this one in here. So here you see the variables, and here you see the console where you can write some code. So we're doing very well. We made a request here. We got a dictionary with the data, and we accessed article titles and descriptions. So you can just duplicate that and print out the description. So we're simply printing out the titles and the descriptions for now in the command line, but the next step is to get these titles and descriptions and send them by email using the smtp-lib library, which we have covered in the previous apps. So with that, we can apply the first commit for our app. So I'll go to VCS and enable version control integration with git, create a .gitignore file, add it to the repository. Venv and .idea will be excluded from the tracking, and main.py should be added because it's in red. So go to git, add it to the repository, and perhaps create a readme.md file. So that's what this app does, and let's commit the changes. This is day 27. Access the news titles and descriptions and commit the changes. So that was about this video. Thanks a lot. Okay, so here is the exercise for you for today. And this is the toughest exercise you have had so far, and I don't expect you to solve this. The secret here is that the simple action of trying to solve this, so your efforts to solve this exercise will improve your problem-solving skills. So this is the task for this exercise. As you know already, previously we were able to access the title and the description of the news articles in the previous exercise. And we were able to print those titles and descriptions in the command line. Your task now is to send these titles and articles by email to your email address. So we have already worked with emails and we already wrote this script in the Portfolio app. If you don't have the script, you can find it attached in the lecture resources for this video, So for your convenience, you can just get this code and place it in your project root directory. But remember to change the username to reflect your Gmail address and your app password for Gmail. I've explained how to create an app password for Gmail in the Portfolio app, and also the receiver could be the same as the sender email address, so you can get the emails in your own Gmail account. So again, the task is to send an email to your email address, and the email should contain the news, the titles and the descriptions of all these articles, which was about 100. Good luck with that, and I'll show you the solution in the next video. Hey, welcome to a new day. Yesterday we built an app which sends out an email to our Gmail account or other email accounts, and that email contained news about a particular category. Today we're going to do two things. First, we're going to refine this app because currently this app is only sending news about Tesla in my case. So we're going to make the app more dynamic, more flexible to send out news about other topics. And then we're also going to deploy this app on a 24/7 server. So a server, a computer which runs continuously, and it will run our script every day at a particular time. So with that, I'll talk to you in the next video. Thanks a lot. In this video, I want to make 5 improvements to the program. The first improvement is, besides the title and the description of the news, we also want to add a link so that the user can click on that link and read more about that particular news. That's the first improvement. The second improvement is we want to show less news because currently there's 100 of them, so perhaps 20 should be better. The third improvement is we want to show only news in English because currently we have some other languages here. For example, this news in here. Fourth improvement, we want to add a subject to the email. And fifth improvement, we want to have the category more dynamic because currently Tesla is hard-coded here in the URL. So we might want to also have the possibility to show other topics. Let's start with the first improvement, links. To add links, you have to go in here where you construct that string. So we add the title, we add a break line, we add the description, and then we add 2 break lines. So the 2 break lines are between the different news. But before we add the 2 break lines, we want to add one other break line, so plus \n, then plus article URL, so like that. So that should do it, but let me split this line because it's getting too long. So there as well. And I'll try the code to make sure it works. And let's check the email. So there we go, we have links. Right, now the language. To fix the language issue, you should add a new parameter to the query. What is a parameter? Well, the URL is made of different parts. It does have the core part first, which is this one in here. So let me show you the complete URL first, as it was in the beginning, without splitting it across multiple lines. So that's the complete URL. Now this is the core part up to here. So everything question mark. Then we have the parameters. So this here is a parameter, Q is the name of the parameter, and Tesla is the value. And then we have this symbol which separates the parameters from each other. So we have the sort by parameter, which defines how the news will be sorted. So these are sorted now by published date. And then we have this symbol again to separate the other parameter from the previous one. And we have the API key, the name of the parameter, and the value, which is this value here of the API key. Now we can add other parameters. So at the end here, you want to write the and symbol, and then language is equal to n. So the parameter name and the value, which is English. So that's also a parameter of this API. And you can find the parameters of this particular API in the newsapi.org website. If you go to documentation and you go to the endpoints and you go to the everything endpoint, and here you should find all the names for the parameters. So language is one of the parameters, and you can pass these languages there. So we have sort by, else well, and other parameters too. Q, which defines the topic, which is currently set to Tesla. So, Now let me improve the view here. So I'll split the string, add the parameters here, and the next parameter after the symbol, and the next one after the symbol. So this makes more sense. It's more readable, I think. So if I run this code now, and I check the email again, I should now see only news in English. Yep, that's the case. So it seems to be working. So let's go back and let's limit the emails to 20 only. For that, all you have to do is go to content article. So this is a list. We're iterating over a list here. And this list has 100 items. But if you use this list indexing, it has to be the first 20. So 0 to 20 or just up to 20, the same. This now should give us only about 20 emails. Let's see. Yeah, it's about 20. So that's fewer news. Next, the subject. And the subject of the email is part of the body of the email. So as you might remember from the previous email lectures in the previous apps, we used to add the subject on top of the message of the email body. So that would be subject, a colon, a space, and then write something for the subject, such as today's news, plus a backslash n operator, because that's a syntax. So the message should be something like subject, today's news, and then we have a break line, and there goes the body of the email, which is the news. So news number 1, news number 2, etc. So you get the idea, I suppose. And I'll split the line in here and try out the code. Let's see. Yeah, that's where the subject is. So it's working. Everything seems to be looking fine. Lastly, the last change I want to make to this code is to fix the hard coding issue. So when something is injected into a value, for example here Tesla is part of this string, that is known as hard-coded. So this is a hard-coded value. To make this more dynamic, we could create a variable here, let's say topic, and then you say Tesla here, and then you convert this into an F string, and instead of Tesla, there you have a placeholder, and then you write the topic there. But be careful here, because this string is spread across multiple lines. So actually the F should be at the line where the placeholder is located. So it should be in here. So with that, you can run the script and check the email, and yeah, there we go. That's still news about Tesla. So it's working fine. So that gives us some more control over what we want to display here. So it's better to change the variable name in here instead of modifying the value of the string itself. So with that, we have done all the 5 improvements. So we're ready to commit the changes. So that's day 28. And you might want to mention here all the improvements. Add links, specify language, limit news, add subject, and control the category. Now, it's a better idea to actually make a commit whenever you want to make one single change. So in this case, it would be better if we added the links, as we did here. So after we did this change, we should have committed the changes, and then we did the other change, and we commit the other change, and in each commit message we only write that particular change that we did. However, I'm not doing that because it would be too much for doing it in a video. Those would be too many pauses. So that's something to keep in mind. You want to commit whenever you make a change, and then you test the program if it's working, and if it's working, then you commit. Yeah, so let's commit. And that's for this video. Thank you for following. Throughout the previous videos, we have been using the request library. We used it in two different ways. First, we tried to get the content of the Yahoo website, and we did that by using the text property, as you see in here. And then we used the request library to get JSON data, and for that, we used the JSON method, as you see here. Now, in both those cases, what we got was text data, so non-binary data. But how do you get binary data? So how do you get an image? How can you download an image with the request library or a zip file from the web or any other file that is not text? That's what I'll show you in this video. So let's go to the browser and perhaps go to a Wikipedia page just to get the link of a file. For example, let's work on an image file. So I'll work on this image here. I will download this image with Python and the request library. So for that, I need to know the URL of the image, because each file, each image which you see on websites, they have a particular URL which locates the image in the server where the website is hosted. To get that URL, you can right-click over this image in Wikipedia and go to Open Image in New tab. And that will open the image on your browser, and you can copy the URL in the address bar. So I'll copy that. And since this is out of the context of our app, I'll just open a Python console and show you the code in here. So first I will create a URL variable to store the image in this variable. Right, so we have the URL variable containing the string pointing to the image. So make sure that the image name ends with an extension, an image extension such as JPG. That means the URL is correctly pointing to that image. So once I have the URL, then I want to import a request. Then I'll make a request object, or you can also say a response object actually, because the requests.get method actually gives you a response of the request, so it makes more sense to call the variable request. So here goes the URL. So with that we have a response, right, which doesn't look anything exciting, but we have this number 200 is an HTTP code, which means the response was successful. Now, we used to work on the text property earlier, but this works when you are loading text data, such as web pages. So web pages are text, but an image is not text. So what you need to use is response.content. So these are bytes which make up the image, and in the command line you can not see the actual image, but you see the actual raw code that makes up the image. So we need to get that code and write it in a file. For that we use the open function, which you have learned before. So with open image.jpg, it was a JPG file, and we need to open this in write binary mode. So for text files, when we created text files, we used to write just W. But this is a binary file, it's not a text file, so we need to write WB as file, a colon, press enter, we indent here 4 spaces, and then we say file, so that variable, dot write, and here we write the response dot content, which points to these data, to these numbers. So with that, you press enter, enter again, and in the root directory of your project, you should see an image.jpg file. So let's refresh, let's reload the disk. Yeah, here it is, and that's the image. So that's how you can download an image using a particular URL, the URL which points to the image. So that's the code again, request.get URL, and then you create an empty file and you populate that file with the content of the response object, and that's it. The same technique can be used for other files. So if you have the link to a file which is hosted on some websites, on the cloud, anywhere on the web, then you can use basically the same code and use the same WB mode here to create the file. And it will work basically the same. Of course, if it's a zip file, you should give here the correct extension in the file name. Yeah, with that, thanks a lot. See you later. Hey, it's great talking to you again. I'm very excited to hand you a very interesting task as part of today's exercise. The task is this. You need to create a website which displays the astronomy image of the day, together with this title and this description about that image. So every day visitors visit your website, a different image should be displayed in here. So where do you find this image? Well, of course you can't get this image out of nothing, you need to get it from somewhere, and you will get it from the NASA Open API. So please go to api.nasa.gov and you should see this web page more or less. And you have the option to generate an API key here, so please provide your name, surname, email, and an API key should be displayed in here after you sign up. Then if you scroll down, you will see the astronomy picture of the day API. So there are several APIs in here, but the one you need to use is this one in here. So I'll not give you any more help. You can explore yourself the documentation of the API. You have the parameters here. You can pass to the URL, an example, etc. So you can build this website with Streamlit, as you might guess. And yeah, I wish you good luck. See you in the solution video. Hey, in this video I'll show you the code which constructs this website. And the code is here. So it's 26 lines of code, and I'll go through the code now and explain you what it does. So we need the request library and the Streamlit libraries. And here I prepared the API key, this one in here, and the URL. The URL, I placed it as a string, so split in 2 lines, and it's an F string, that's the second part. And the API key goes here. You could also place it directly in here without using an F string. Either way, it's fine. Then I created a response object using the request.get, providing that URL, so the URL pointing to the astronomy picture of the day API. And I got the data as JSON. So at this point, if I debug this program, just to show you the data look like this. So it has the explanation, the title, and the URL. So that's it, up to here, and then we have these 3 lines. So I decided to extract the title of the image, the URL of the image, and the explanation of the image in 3 different variables. So this is not necessary, you could also use this directly further down without having variables. Either way is also fine. And then I downloaded the image here. So first I decided to create a variable where I store the file path that the downloaded image will contain. So I've used quite a lot of variables here in the code. And then I have this response object. It's another request that we're doing, but this time we're requesting the image URL. The first time it was the URL of the API, but now we get the image URL, which was inside the data which we extracted from the API. And then I opened a new file using the WB mode. So that's the name of the file, img.png, and I wrote the content of the response object, which I created in here. And then this is about Streamlit, so I wrote a title which corresponds to that. I wrote the image using that image file path to render the image. And finally, I wrote the explanation using a write method. So that's the code. It's quite simple. And that's about this video. Thanks, see you. During the last few days, we built a program which accessed data from a REST API. Now, that REST API was built by other people, but today you learn how to build your own REST API in Python. And what you're looking at is the actual API that we will build together. So this page is actually the documentation of the API that we will build. So the API has a homepage, just like the news API had a homepage where you could see the documentation, how to use the API. So what we've got here is some minimal documentation. It tells you what the format of the endpoint is. So that's the base URL up to here, and then you can provide a station and a date, and that will give you temperature data about that particular station. Now, down here, you'll see a list of stations, and that's about 6,500 of them. So that's a lot of stations, and these are stations across Europe. So, for example, if you want the station Stockholm, that station has a station ID of 10, so if you want the weather for Stockholm for a particular date, you would access an endpoint like this. So station and date. You see the date is at the end, so 1988 is the year, 10 is the month, and 25 is the day. So 25th of October 1988. So if we click that URL, so that's the URL. With that endpoint, what you get is this JSON data. So we have this pair of data, so the date we requested, the station ID, and then we get the temperature, which is what the user wants. So the temperature for that day, the average temperature for that day was minus 0.9 Celsius degree. Similarly, you can enter here any station number. So let's change the URL to something else. For example, from 10 we make it 14, the same date, and you see that the temperature for that date was 11. So station number 14 was Salzburg in Austria. So those are weather observation stations, and that's the API. So there's a lot of data that I'll give you, and you'll use this data to serve them through your API. So there's a lot of fun stuff to learn and extremely useful. So let's keep going, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey, welcome back. As part of today's programming concept, you learn how to program in HTML. HTML is a language, that's for sure. HTML is the language which builds every web page on the web. And HTML is interpreted by your browser. So basically every page that you see, if you right-click over that page and go to View Page Source, that is actually HTML, and your browser is interpreting this language and displaying the output, which is this page. Now, why am I teaching you HTML? Well, because I showed you earlier this page, right? So that's the homepage of our API, which gives some information here. And so this is also built in HTML. Now, I want to clarify something though. When you use a library such as Streamlit, you don't need to know HTML. So as you have seen before, for Streamlit, we simply wrote some Python codes such as st.write, and then we enter some text here, and that would translate to something on the browser. The secret here is that Streamlit produces HTML for us, so we don't need to write HTML. So if you click over the pages we have produced with Streamlit, if you right click and go to Views Page Source, again you'll see HTML code. So that HTML code is also produced by Streamlit. But there are other libraries such as Flask and Django. These libraries are also used to build websites, just like Streamlit is used to build websites. But Flask and Django don't produce that HTML. Now you'd ask, well, why not using Streamlit for everything then? Well, that would not be a good idea for more complex apps because you can't just make any app with Streamlit. So Streamlit is limited to more simple websites and more simple apps. If you want to build an API, for example, you can't do that with Streamlit. You need something like Flask or Django. And Flask is what we're going to use today. So before we jump into Flask, I want to introduce you to HTML. Therefore, let me delete that. Therefore, we want to create an HTML file here. So right click, go to new and create an HTML file, give it a name. Let's say tutorial. You don't need to give the HTML extension because PyCharm will give the extension automatically. So if you created that HTML like I did, you should see some code already. So PyCharm added some code. Another way to create the HTML file would be to right click and go to new and go to a simple file, and then you'd say tutorial2.html, for example, but then you'd need to write that code manually in here. So every HTML page, every HTML document needs to have that code. So I'll delete the tutorial2.html and keep tutorial.html. Now, so this is an HTML document, and you can open it by right-clicking and go to Open in Browser and open with one of your browsers, or you can just click this one of these icons here if they show on your PyCharm. So like you can click on Chrome, and for now this is an empty web page, but we can add content. To add content to a web page, you need to do that inside these body tags. So all these are called tags. This is a head tag, this is an HTML tag, this is a body tag. The actual content, the visible content, is added inside the body tags. I'll explain what these tags are also, but let's add some content first. For example, hello here. You don't need to save the page, just go to that button again and hello is rendered in here. So there we have a simple web page with some content. Let me zoom that in. So there we go. Let's add some more content. Now, it's a good idea to actually use proper tags for each element, for each content that you add. So I added this tag. It's a p tag. It means a paragraph. A paragraph tag is used to add normal text, like hello, this is our first web page. So now if you go to the web page, you can refresh, or in my case, this refreshes automatically. Otherwise, you need to press Ctrl R or Command R to refresh the page if the automatic refresh is not working. So that's the paragraph we just added. Now, it's a good idea to actually indent this with a tab like that, because what we're looking here is now like a hierarchy of tags. So the first tag is this doc type HTML. This is like the declaration of what this type of document is. And then we have the HTML tag. Now, if I select this tag, you'll see that this will be highlighted, this closing HTML tag. So every tag has an opening tag. So it opens in here and it closes in here. And everything inside is part of that tag. And then we have the head tag. It opens here and it closes in here. and everything inside those two tags is part of the head tags, right? These are part of the two head tags. Now, these are some declarations of the title of the web page and the character set of the web page. So if we change this to, let's say, my web page, and you go to the web page, you'll see here on the tab on the browser, my web page is shown. So that's the title of the web page. And then we have the body tags. So now everything that we enter here is part of the actual web page. So let me show you some more tags. We have the H1 tag, welcome, and that will render as big font in here. You also have smaller headings. So these are headings like this is our web page, and that will render like this. And then we have the P tags, so normal text. Now, next, let's add an image. To add an image, you need the img tag, but then before you close the tag, you want to add an src property, which is equal to this quotes, and inside the quotes, you need to enter the path to the image you want to display. cat.png. Now this image has to be in the same directory with tutorial.html. So I'll paste the image here, which I copied before. You can find this image attached in the lecture resources, or you can use your own images. So cat.png, cat.png. Then you want to close this tag, and that's it. Now, image is one of those tags that doesn't need this closing tag, so you need to remove that. It doesn't need that tag because, so that's the content. So it doesn't need a closing tag because we're not showing any text. So usually between the tags we show some information, but since the image path is given through this property, then we don't have any other information to show besides the image. Now this cat is quite big, as you can see. So for that, we can add styling to the image using a style property, and that would be equal to quotes, and inside quotes you give the properties such as width, let's say 500 pixels, px, and then you do this semicolon and then height. So we're still inside these quotes. The height, let's say 400 px, so don't forget the px, and let's check the cat. So I can see that the ratio, the aspect ratio of the image has changed. So if you want to preserve the aspect ratio, then you need to only give one of these properties, so only the width, and the aspect ratio will adjust, so the height will be relative to the width. So that's what we have so far. Let me show you now how to add a link. A link can be added using the a tag with an href property, and there you give like https google.com. So that's a link, and then you close the link, and this has a closing a tag, and inside here you give the description of the link, the text of the link, such as Google page, and it will be rendered like this. So if you click that, it will take us to Google. And the problem here is that this was rendered in the same page with the image. But you can fix that by using a break tag, like that. So this creates a break line. As you see now, there's a break line after the image, so between the image and the link. You can add more break lines if you want more space between the two elements, just like that. Okay, so we need to add one more element to this code, and then we're done. What I want to add is something here on top. What I want to add is a nav element, and this will contain multiple other elements, nested elements, which will be like this tags. I'll just copy these actually. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. I'll change the links to about, this to contact us, and the last one, store or something like that. So let me change the descriptions as well. I'll explain what I'm doing in just a bit. Contact us and store. So if I go to the web page now, we will see that what I've just added is the actual navigation menu of the website. So that's how you can add the navigation menu. The problem here is that if we click over one of these, the page is not found. So you see that the browser is trying to access the page Contact Us. The page is not found because this is just one HTML page. And now we're stepping into the world of interactions. And to do such interactions, to enable such interactions, you need a web framework, such as Django or Flask. So these are web frameworks written in Python, and these enable you to create complete websites with multiple pages so that the pages can interact with each other. And so for that, you need web frameworks. You need a language such as Python or PHP. So PHP also has its own frameworks, and Python has its own frameworks such as Flask and Django. And we will use, of course, Python. And exactly how we use Python, that's a question which you'll understand in the next videos. So get ready for that and see you later. Thanks. In the previous video, we created a website. Actually, this is not a website, it's just a web page. Now we're going to create a website which has multiple pages. And to create a website, you need a web framework. And we're going to use the Flask web framework for that. So Flask is a Python library. That means you need to install it. So make sure you have created a PyCharm project, and there I have the main.py file, which is currently empty, and I have this tutorial.html file, which I'm going to use. You can find this attached in the lecture resources if you don't have it. And you'll also find this cat.png file, which is needed by this HTML document. So let's go to main and import Flask. Actually, we only need the Flask class from the Flask library. So install package Flask. The package is being installed, so the web framework is being installed. So this web framework is what's going to manage multiple HTML pages. So you can think of a web framework as a manager of multiple pages, and it's responsible that these pages interact with each other correctly. So Flask was installed successfully on my computer, and the first thing we want to do now is we want to create a website object. So this Flask here is a class, and this class creates website object instances, or you can also say Flask object instances, but think of it as a website object. So just like we have strings to represent text, we have numbers to represent numbers, lists to represent series of objects, we also have website objects to represent websites. So let's create a variable and say Flask, so that class, and give a name to this. It can be anything, we'll change it later, but for now let's say website, whatever it is. So with that we have a website object. Now we need to connect HTML pages with this website object. To do that, we refer to the app variable, this variable, using this special symbol, the @ symbol. I'll explain in just a bit why we use that symbol. And so you refer to that and then to the root method of that app object. And inside here, in quotes, you give a path, let's say home. So you know that whenever you go to a website and you click on different links, those links take you to a particular path to that website, particular URL in that website. So each page has a particular URL. So this HTML that we'll connect now will have this URL. And the HTML will be inside this function that we need to define in here. Let's call this function home. You can call it whatever you like. And this will return this HTML document. And so that HTML document will be rendered whenever the users visit your website URL/home. So for that we need to return, but you cannot return tutorial.html directly like that. You need to return it through a function which you need to import first. The function is called render template. And then you go here and then you say render template tutorial.html. But tutorial.html has to be inside a specific folder in the root directory. That folder should be named templates with lowercase letters and ending with s, so not template but template. So you see my folder is here, it's in the same directory with main.py, so that's the root directory, and inside template you want to drag tutorial.html. So make sure that tutorial is there, so tutorial.html, and here you say tutorial.html. So Flask will look for HTML documents inside that templates folder by default. So Flask is configured to look for a templates folder in your root directory. And lastly, we need to say here app.run and give an argument for the debug. So the debug argument should be true, and this will allow you to see errors on the web page. If there are errors, so you want to see them to understand what's going on. Make some space here, and yeah, let's run this. To run this app, you can just right click and go to run main. And that's the URL of the app, so click that. And we see this not found page because we haven't created such a URL yet, so that would be the home page. If you delete home from there and save the script, go here, refresh the page, then you should see this view. Otherwise, if you wanted to have home here, then you should type in home here, right? And then you go to this page. So now it's rendering fine because the URL, so this URL is connected to that HTML document. So in other words, what's happening is that when the user visits that URL, this function is called. So that root is connected to this function, and the decorator makes it possible. So this @ symbol here means that this line is a decorator and it decorates this function. So basically it connects that method to this function, so that when this is visited on the browser, this is called and tutorial.html is rendered. That's the idea. Now, if you want more pages, you can duplicate this function and here write something else such as about, and then here say something like about.html, create an about.html file, about, so there we go, about.html. Maybe write something here in the body tag, hello, I am the about page. Go to main.py, make sure everything looks fine. Oh, you need to change the home function to something else like about. Then save the script, go to the browser and change the URL to about, and you'll get that page, as you can see here. Hello, I am the about page. Then next, what you can do is you can go to tutorial.html and you can go to the nav element and make sure that you have the URL of the about in here. So about here, about here. That means when you click that about menu item from here, that should take you to the about page, but you need to add one more slash here in the root. So let's refresh. Yeah, there we go. So again, what we just did, let me wrap it up. What we just did is that we have this app with 2 pages, 2 URLs, 2 pages. The first URL is the domain name, which in our case, since it is local, the domain name is 127.0.0.1.500. So domain name / home gives us that page. And this page renders tutorial.html, and this tutorial.html has this content and this menu bar in here, and the about link points to the about page. It's a page of our website. And so when the user clicks that link, this is visited, and when that is visited, this function is called, and that function renders the about.html document. So that's the idea. That's how you create multiple page websites, and you can do that with Flask, as you just saw. Now, we have an issue here with the image, so the image is not being displayed. To display images, you need to create another folder in the root directory and call it static. And inside static, you put the images. So I'll drag this cat.png image to static. And you also need to do something else besides putting the image there. You need to go to tutorial.html, locate the image, the img tag, which is in here, and you need to change this. So this is dynamic now, and you need to give this syntax. So double underscores, and you say URL for static in single quotes, and then a comma, and then in single quotes cat.png. So you need to declare the folder where cat is, and be careful here. All this, the parentheses, the curly parentheses should go inside double quotes. So please double check this. We have this bracket here which closes in here, and then src has this enclosed in quotes, and then we have URL for static enclosed in single quotes, cat.png in single quotes, and these should be double quotes, and these two need to be in parentheses. So basically this is like a method. It's like a Python method with 2 arguments, static and cat.png. So static is a string, cat.png is a string. So this method is inside double curly brackets, and the curly brackets are inside double quotes. So let's go back to the website. So we need to go to one of the valid URLs. We have home or about. So that /home. So that's one of the errors you might get on the web page. So this says that URL 4 takes 2 positional arguments, but 3 were given. So let's check it. We need to go to tutorial.html. And I know that the problem here is that you need to give this argument name. So with that, let's go and refresh. And finally, that's the image. The cat is very angry because we had lots of errors, obviously, but that's fine. Yeah, that's the final code for this app. So that's what a web framework does. You have a Python file, and the Python file is managing multiple HTML pages, and it's defining when these HTML pages should be displayed on the website through these root methods. Yeah, thanks for following. We will continue with Flask because we need to build an API with Flask. So in the next videos, we need to build the web page of our API where we show the documentation of our API. So see you there. Hey, welcome back. In this video, we will construct the API documentation page and the API page itself where the users can get JSON data. Let's begin. So far we worked on some examples which were not related to our app. So I just wanted to introduce you to Flask. Now we have two pages here. One points to our domain/homepage and the other points to our domain/about page. So what I want to do now is first I want to move these HTML pages out of the templates folder, because in templates now I'll insert another home.html page. So tutorial and about were not related to our project, so I removed them from templates. Now in home.html I'm going to write some documentation about the API, and in main.py in here I'm removing that home name so that when the users visit the domain homepage without entering any subdirectory, they can go to this home.html page. So let's try that. Let's put some hello string here and go to main, and this should go and be changed to home.html, so it points to that home.html file, and run main.py. So if you click over the domain, that should take you to the home page. So we see the string hello, so home.html has been displayed here on the home page. Then in the home page we want to put some basic information such as an h1 tag, weather data API, so this should be something about our API. If I refresh the page, should display in here. So let me put this on the right, this on the left, so we see what's going on. And the title should also be probably the same, weather data API. So this is the title of this particular web page. Next, we should think about what URL format are we going to have. So in this paragraph here, we can tell the users, the visitors, the type of URL they can enter. Later on, when we deploy this app on a host, on a server, we're going to get a domain such as example.com or mypythonapi.com. But for now, our domain name is this locally. So we want to tell the user something like, I'm copying this HTTP URL. So we want to tell the user that the URL format will be something like this, /API v1. So you can write whatever you like here, right? You can write APPI or APPIS, whatever you like. So, but it makes sense to write something meaningful. And so after the slash, I'm writing v1 to basically tell users that this is version 1. Of course, you don't have to write this. You can leave it like that. You can also leave it like that and then continue here with the parameters such as station and date. But this is a good idea to have API v1, and then you write the parameters station and date. Now this part, the station and the date, will be dynamically entered by the user. So if you still don't understand what I'm doing, let me write a new paragraph. URL example. So here you'll understand what I'm talking about. So basically that's a format, that's a formula, so to say, and this would be an example. Let's say station with the code 10 and date 1988 10 25th. So 25th of October 1988, we are asking for data for this station. So let me refresh the page here. Yeah, that's what the user is going to see. And then they can try this URL, for example, put it on the address bar, and that URL should give data for this particular station. Now, our main.py script should be able to handle this kind of URL. So currently, this script is only handling this URL, so the home page and the about page. Now, we don't need an about page, so let's change this about page to API v1. So API v1, so when the user visits API v1 slash station with this brackets, so less than, greater than. This is a special syntax of the URL pattern you place in Flask, and the same goes for date, like that. So these two denote that the users can enter values for these two. So any value that the user enters, let's suppose the user in the URL here enters, for example, this, they place it here, so they place 10 for station. Now that 10, that value 10, is going to be stored in the station argument here of this function, station and date, right? So date will go here and station will go in here. And then what we will do here, but we will do that tomorrow, but I can give you some clue now to help you understand what's going on. So in here, then we will do something like df is equal to pandas.read CSV, and we're going to read our data, which contain all the historical weather data, and we're going to get these data, and then we're going to get the temperature for a particular station, for that station, let's say station like that, for a particular date. So I'm going to show you the exact syntax, but for now I'm just trying for you to understand what's going on. So we're going to get the temperature, and then we're going to return the temperature here on the website, on the web page, when the user clicks that URL. So basically, let's suppose for now that we were able to extract the temperature of 23. So we are just supposing the temperature is 23. I'm hard coding this value. Of course, we will get it from the actual data, but for now, let's keep things simple. So once we have the temperature, then we can return the temperature directly like that. Let's give it a try. Save the main.py file, go here, enter that URL. If you get this error, it says that the return type must be a string, dict, list, tuple with headers, etc. But we returned an integer here. So you can simply convert this into a string, refresh the page, and that's what we get, 23. So when the users ask for a particular station and a particular date, we will calculate, we will find out what the temperature was at that particular date for that station and return it here. But a better idea would be to construct a dictionary here. So something like station, and tell the user what station they chose, and then date. So this is good to have. It's not necessary, but it's good to give the users a complete dictionary, also telling them what they chose, so they have a complete view of the data and the date as well. So station is this variable, date is that variable, and finally temperature, which is equal to the temperature value. So these are strings, right? These are variables, don't confuse them. And refresh, save first, refresh, and now we finally get some JSON data here. So that's the date, and that's the actual date that the user entered in the URL. So if I change this to 26, reload, we get 26. If I change the station to 20, we get 24, the station. Of course, the temperature will also be dynamically calculated for every load of the page, but for now it's just static. So now we have this data, and as you saw in the previous app where we accessed the news API data, you can build any app you can imagine to extract these data and then maybe show those data on a website or send them by email, construct some graphs with the temperature values of different days. You can do anything. So that was about the tutorials for today. We focused on Flask. Now, just before I close this video, I want to do a last change here for today in the app. So it's a good practice to not use website here as a name for the Flask app, but to use name. Name is a special variable. I want to demonstrate you what exactly name is. I'll create a file, a.py. You don't have to create these files, so I'll delete them. So if I print name here and I execute this a.py file, I'm going to get main as output. So this variable contains this string underscore underscore main underscore underscore. Now if I create a second b.py file and here I import a and then I execute b.py, we're going to get a as output. So what happens is that when I execute b, inside b we are importing a, but when a is imported, a is executed. That means print name is executed. So in this case, name had the value of a. So in other words, when this a script is imported from some other script, the value of the name variable will have the value of the name of the script. But when the script is executed directly, the value of name will be main. We can take advantage of this fact in here and say that if name is equal to main, then we want to run the Flask app. In other words, we only want to run this Flask app when this main.py script is executed directly. But if we are importing this script from some other scripts, let's say we want to import main from this script, in that case our purpose perhaps is to use some functions of the main script which we may define later on. So our purpose is not to run this app, right? If we import that app from somewhere, our purpose is just to use some elements of that app. So that's why we have this condition here. So we only run the websites when this script is executed directly and not when the script is imported from somewhere else. That's the entire purpose of this expression and that name variable. So this is a common practice. And yeah, that's it. Let's do some reformatting. So this needs 2 break lines here to be more readable according to the coding styles. And that's it. I'll delete the 2 A and B files. Then I will enable version control, VCS, enable version control, so that we can commit our first changes. So let's create a .gitignore file, add it to the repository, then and .idea will be excluded. Then we want to add to the repository the static folder, the templates folder, gitignore and main.py. About and tutorial.html were files where we did some trials and simple examples, so they are not related to the project. Therefore, I'll not add them to the tracking. So with that, right click, go to Git and add. So all these files are in green now and they are ready to be committed. So this is day 29 and this is the initial commit. So commit the changes and we're done with the videos, with the tutorials for today. Thanks a lot. Hey, in this video I want to give you some quick information regarding running multiple Flask apps. So in our case, we were simply running one app, but it could happen that you might create a second app on a separate PyCharm project. And if you have this app running, this app is running on port 5000. That means you will not be able to run the other app because this port is occupied. So all the Flask apps run on port 5000 by default, but you can change that. So if you're running another app, you can specify the port argument here in the last line. So you can say port is equal to 5001. So give it a different port name from the default port, which is 5000. So if I close this, if I run this app again, you will see that this app will run on port 5001. So that will not clash with the other app which was running in port 5000. Note that if the apps are not running at the same time, it's not needed to specify that port. But just in case you run the apps at the same time, and the second app will give you an error here, it will say that the port is occupied, then you should remember that you should specify another port here to fix that error. So that's what I wanted to tell you in this video. See you in the next one. In this video, I'll give you the task for today's exercise, and the task consists of creating a new app. And that will be an API. So you need to build an API as part of this exercise. Now, before I explain you the exact task for today, let me demonstrate you the API that you need to build. So this is how it works. This API returns the definition of English words. For example, when the user enters the domain /API/v1 and then they enter a word such as pillow, they get this dictionary. So the dictionary should return the definition of the word pillow in this case, and also the word itself. Let's try another word. Let's say sun. Again, we get the definition, so that's the key definition and the value. In this case, we have multiple values, but it's still the same string, so sun has multiple meanings. You have meaning 1 up to here, and then we have this \n, and then meaning 2 up to here. But it's still one string. And then again we have the word key and its value sun, which is the word that the user entered. So any word that the users enter here as part of the URL will be sent to your program, and your program will return its definition here. Now this site, if you visit the homepage, should also have a basic homepage, which could look like this. So basically you give the format to the users and an example of a URL request. So basically some simple documentation. So that's the final program that you will build, and you'll build it across 2 days, starting today and also tomorrow. So the task for today, your task is to create this homepage, and also when the users enters a word such as sun, for example, what you should return as part of the definition here is not the definition itself, but simply return the same word that the user entered here, but in capital letters. So your output should look something like this, just for today. So instead of the actual definition, just get the user's word and return its uppercase version like this. So that's just to take things step by step. So tomorrow I'll give you the actual data set, which has all the words and the definitions. So these are CSV data, and then you can simply implement the actual data to make the final app. But for today, two tasks, the homepage and this kind of output for the part of the API. Yeah, good luck with that. Hey, welcome back. This is a new app and this is one of my most favorite apps for this course. So in this video I want to demonstrate you what the app looks like and what it does, so you know what you're going to build throughout the next videos. So one of the things you have learned so far is how to build web apps with Streamlit, and you have also learned how to do data visualization inside Jupyter. Now for this app, you're going to join these two skills together and build a so-called data web app or data app. So this here is a data app, and it's called a data app because it shows visualizations, as you'll see in just a bit. So let me demonstrate you what this app is about. So that's the page where the user accesses the app, and the user can type in a place here. It can be any town, any city on Earth. Let's try something like Tirana. The user can press enter, and what you get is the graph with the temperature in the next 1 day. But the user can slide this and can have the temperature graph for 2 days up to 5 days. So you can see that in October the 1st the temperature will be at this point, and then it goes up during the day, goes down October 12th, October the 2nd, that's around midnight, and then goes up and so down. So that's for the next 5 days. We have the date and the temperature in degrees Celsius. But the user can also see the sky. So if they press the sky in the drop-down menu here, they should see the sky condition every 3 hours for multiple days. So that's for 5 days, right? You can slide the slider and everything is interactive. So you can see that the sky condition is updated to show only the next 3 days. So there we go. If you change back to temperature, it updates to show the temperature for the next 2 days, as you see the slider here. So that's the app. It's quite simple, but it is very interactive and it brings together the power of Python and Streamlit. So we're going to use Streamlit to build this app. And as you can see, Streamlit can be combined with plotting, so the plotting can interact with widgets. That means you can build many kinds of apps using these interactions, these widgets, these elements that Streamlit gives you. So without further ado, I hope this is clear, and let's start building the app in the next videos. See you there.